The story of my comatose son is something I will never be able to erase from my memory. Right there, outside the intensive care unit, my husband coldly demanded a divorce so he could go on vacation with his mistress. 3 days later, the hospital revealed a truth that caused the entire family to collapse. My son was lying there amid a tangle of white IV tubes and the chilling, rhythmic beep of the life support ventilator. Meanwhile, my husband stood in the hallway of Northwestern Memorial Hospital in Chicago, holding his mistress's hand, throwing divorce papers in my face. He said the tickets for their trip to the Maldives had been booked long ago, and he couldn't let a sleeping child ruin the fun with his beautiful companion. But Alexander never imagined that just 3 days later, while enjoying paradise on the other side of the world, a call from the hospital would turn his arrogance to ashes. The truth about his own flesh and blood, whom he had repudiated, dragged the entire family into the most terrifying shock of their lives. I invite you to follow my story. The smell of antiseptic in the ICU at dawn will always be my greatest obsession. That acrid scent that seeped into every strand of hair, that sterile gown that makes you feel the line between life and death, is as fragile as a spider's web. I sat on the cold tile floor, my back against the immaculate wall, eyes swollen from crying incessantly for 12 hours outside those glass doors. Leo, my 6-year-old son, lay motionless. His pale, tiny face was dwarfed by all the modern medical equipment. Suddenly, the sound of firm footsteps echoed in the deserted hallway. I raised my head, hoping it was Alexander, praying he finally had a shred of conscience to come see our son. But no, Alexander appeared in an impeccable tailored suit, wearing his usual lopsided smirk, and by his side was Vanessa. She wore a tight red dress, held a designer handbag, and looked at me with sharp eyes, as if I were a pile of garbage blocking her path. "Sign here, Anna." "I don't have much time," Alexander said, tossing a stack of papers onto my lap. It was a divorce settlement drafted entirely in his favor, along with a power of attorney that allowed him to sell our luxury house in Lincoln Park without my presence. I looked at Alexander, the man who had sworn eternal love to me for the past 8 years now transformed into a terrifying stranger. "Alexander, Leo hasn't even woken up yet. The doctor says he's in the most critical phase." "You are his father. How can you do this right now?" "I already told you. We were over a long time ago. Whether this kid wakes up or not won't change the fact that I want to marry Vanessa. Look at you, haggard, unkempt, sitting on the floor. You're an embarrassment to my family." "Anna, please, don't use the child to trap Alexander." Vanessa intervened with a syrupy voice. "Poor little guy. But those of us who are alive have to keep living. We already bought the package for the Maldives. We fly out tonight out of O'Hare. Just sign and get this weight off your shoulders." Alexander already paid for the best private specialists to check on him today. That's more than humanitarian, don't you think? I jumped to my feet, my hands shaking with rage. The humiliation and resentment formed a bitter knot in my throat. My son was hovering between life and death, and they were talking about humanity for paying 1 day's hospital bill before flying off to enjoy themselves. "Get out of here, this is family business," I yelled at her before glaring at my husband. "Alexander, do you really want to abandon your son right now? Do you have any shred of humanity left? From the moment you let my son fall from a second-story balcony, in my mother's eyes and mine, you lost the right to be part of this family. Sign it, and I'll let you keep the old house back in your hometown in downstate Illinois as a final act of mercy. If you act stubborn, I'll cancel your credit cards and refuse to pay for the private rehab clinic the kid will need if he wakes up, and then don't blame me for being ruthless." "That's right, Anna," Vanessa added. "When Alexander gets mad, nobody can stop him. Besides, if you sign quickly, he'll be in a good enough mood to leave you a little cash to survive on. If you wait to take this to the Cook County Courthouse, you'll end up with nothing. I guarantee it." I looked into Vanessa's eyes and clearly saw her greed and victory reflected in them. I understood that she had whispered enough poisonous things into Alexander's ear to make him do a complete 180. Alexander had always been a macho man, obsessed with appearances. All it took was for Vanessa to cleverly plant a few doubts, and he was willing to trample over everything. Fine, I'll sign. But remember this. Today, you turn your back on your son, and in the future, even if you fall to your knees and beg, I will never let him acknowledge a father like you. Worry about yourself first. Let's go, Vanessa. It's almost time to head to the airport. They turned around. The sound of Vanessa's stiletto heels clicking against the floor felt as sharp as knives in my heart. I took a pen and signed my name on the paper while my tears blurred the ink. In that moment, I felt completely hollow. 8 years of my youth, blood, sweat, and tears helping him build his career only to receive such a blatant betrayal. I turned toward the ICU door and placed my hand on the freezing glass. Leo, you have to wake up. Mommy only has you left. Don't leave me alone among these cold-blooded people. The machines inside continued to beep monotonously without response. The hospital corridor fell back into a sepulchral silence. I sat down, hugging my own trembling shoulders. About 2 hours later, my mother-in-law, Teresa, arrived. She wasn't alone, she was accompanied by a couple of Alexander's aunts. Upon seeing me, she didn't ask a single question about Leo's condition. Instead, she immediately zeroed in on the paper in my hand. Anna, did you sign it yet? Alexander just called to tell me you agreed. Yes. He forced me to sign right outside Leo's ICU room. Forced? Nonsense. He has to look out for his future. If he stays chained to you and carries the weight of a bedridden child, not even a mountain of money would be enough. I'm telling you the truth, don't hold a grudge. A man needs a woman who brings him good luck. Ever since you married into this family, it's been nothing but storms. How can you say that, Teresa? Leo is your grandson. My grandson. Yes, but a grandson should be healthy, running, and jumping. A bedridden kid waiting for death is nothing but a burden. Well, start packing your things. Alexander plans to put the Lincoln Park house in Vanessa's name. It will be her wedding gift. My ears rang. That house was bought with half the money my parents gave me, plus what I had saved for years working as an accountant. And now, out of my mother-in-law's mouth, it was magically becoming the mistress's property. This cruelty had pushed me past my breaking point. I looked at Teresa, and for the first time in my life, there was no submission in my gaze, only glacial determination. Tell Alexander I am not leaving that house until there's a final ruling from a judge, and neither is Leo. No matter what happens, he is still part of this family. Don't think you can wash your hands so easily. Teresa was about to scream and curse at me, but just then, the head of the department stepped out. His face was stern, and he looked at me with a certain compassion. Mrs. Anna, step into my office, please. We just got the results of the additional blood tests, and we have new findings regarding little Leo's condition. My heart sank. I quickly followed the doctor, ignoring my mother-in-law's disdainful muttering behind me. In the small office, permeated with the smell of old paper, Dr. Miller placed a thick file on his desk, stared at me for a long time, and then spoke slowly. There is a truth I must discuss with you privately before announcing it to the family. This will completely change how everyone views little Leo's accident. I held my breath, my hands intertwined beneath the desk. What truth? Why did the doctor look so tense? And why was this truth somehow tied to the fact that Alexander was in the Maldives? I had no idea that what I was about to hear would be the beginning of a spectacular revenge that would force the traitors to pay with their honor and even their lives. Doctor. Miller adjusted his glasses and lowered his voice, making the atmosphere in the room even thicker. He flipped to the last page of the file, showing chromatography graphs and a blood chemistry analysis chart. Mrs. Anna, we found traces of a high-dose sedative in little Leo's blood. This medication is not part of the hospital's treatment protocol. Nor could it appear in a 6-year-old's body from normal food ingestion. Unless it was premeditated. I was stunned. My head was spinning. Sedatives. What did the doctor mean? It meant Leo hadn't just slipped because he was a hyperactive kid. Before the accident, My child had been under the influence of a drug that temporarily paralyzed his nervous system and made him lose his balance completely. That was the reason why, when he fell from that height, he had no natural self-defense reflexes. An icy current ran down my spine. I remembered that afternoon. Alexander said he was busy with a meeting and asked Vanessa to pick up Leo early from kindergarten to go get ice cream. When I got home from work, I only saw Leo lying lifeless on the patio. Vanessa was crying in a panic, saying the boy had been naughty and climbed the railing. Could it be? Could it have been them? Try to stay calm. We've also discovered something very important. Look at these DNA and blood type test results. I looked at the paper the doctor handed me. The technical symbols were clear, and when I understood their meaning, I felt the ground open up beneath my feet. This truth was too terrifying. It wasn't just an attempted murder. It was a multi-layered betrayal I could never have imagined. The doctor continued, his voice now carrying contained indignation. This can no longer be hidden. In 3 days, when we have the official results from the Forensics Institute, we will notify the Chicago Police Department. But Anna, you must prepare yourself mentally, because the person who needs to see this right now is not us, but someone who holds the ultimate key to this case. I stood up, shaking. The doctor's words echoed in my head. 3 days. Exactly in 3 days. Alexander would return from the Maldives, and that would be the moment I would send him exactly where he belonged. But first, I had to meet the person the doctor had just mentioned. Who was this person? Why were they appearing right now? Leaving the doctor's office, I saw the sky was gray, but inside me, a flame of hatred and vengeance began to burn. I walked out of Dr. Miller's office with legs as heavy as lead, but with a terrifyingly clear mind. The numbers on the lab report, the high-dose sedative indicators, kept spinning in my head. Down the hallway, the pale fluorescent light reflected on the tiles, casting my solitary shadow. I stopped in front of a large window and watched the traffic weaving through the bustling streets of Chicago. 8 years ago, I had also looked out at this city, but with eyes full of hope, my hand intertwined with Alexander's, blindly believing in a happy future for us both. Yet, that future had turned into a black swamp, burying my youth and almost taking my little boy's life. Back then, Alexander was just a humble engineer earning a miserable salary, struggling to survive in the city. We rented a tiny, cramped apartment in Rogers Park. Every time it rained heavily, the plumbing would back up. I worked as an accountant for a manufacturing plant 8 hours a day, and at night, I did the books for small businesses to make extra cash. Our dinner often consisted of nothing but ramen noodles, a cheap omelet, and stale bread. On cold Midwestern winter nights, the wind would howl through the cracks of the cheap aluminum windows. Alexander would hold me tight under a thin, frayed blanket. Anna, I promise you, one day, I'm going to make a lot of money. I'll buy you a 3-story house and make you live like a queen. Just hold on a little longer with me. I will never betray your good heart. The promises of a man in poverty sounded so sincere, so touching. I believed him blindly. I sold all the jewelry my parents had gifted me for my wedding, giving it all to Alexander so he could start a small construction company. When his business ran out of capital, I mortgaged my parents' farmland back home to get a bank loan to pay his workers. During the months he traveled away for construction jobs, I stayed home, pregnant with Leo, juggling the bills. I didn't dare buy myself a new dress. I glued the soles of my old shoes to keep wearing them, hoping to save every penny to fund my husband's budding career. And then, it seemed the heavens rewarded our efforts. 4 years after we married, Alexander's company won several massive contracts. The money started pouring in. We bought a spacious townhouse in Lincoln Park, expensive cars, and Leo was born surrounded by material abundance. But the price of wealth was too high. When someone crawls out of the mud, they often forget who reached out to pull them up. Alexander began to change. At first, he just came home late with the excuse of entertaining clients, smelling of expensive liquor and sending texts saying he wouldn't make it for dinner. Gradually, he began spending nights away from home openly. Alexander's change also brought another storm named his mother. As soon as we bought the new house, Teresa moved from the country to the city with the excuse of taking care of her grandson, but her presence didn't bring laughter, only suffocating rules and undisguised contempt. She looked down on me, a woman whose beauty had faded from years of frugality and hard work. Look at you, if you walk down the street with Alexander, people will think you're his older sister. The husband is a CEO, and the wife dresses like an unkempt country bumpkin. If you don't know how to fix yourself up, when he goes out looking for someone on his level, don't come crying to this house. Men with money need a flower to admire, not a wrinkled maid. Teresa. I dress simply because I want to save for the family. The money Alexander earns belongs to both of us. I don't want to waste it on useless things. Besides, he loves me for who I am, not how I look. Don't give me that sob story about sharing the hard times. My son earns that money with the sweat of his brow. You just sit around and enjoy this house. He's the one making the decisions. You can't even give him a second child to fill the house, and on top of that, you dare talk back to me. Let me tell you, if you don't know how to keep your husband, there are dozens of young, beautiful, capable girls out there ready to take your place. My mother-in-law's biting words were like daily hammer blows to my self-esteem. And then, what she predicted came true. Vanessa appeared. She wasn't just a regular business partner like Alexander had introduced her. She was young, attractive, cunning, and knew exactly how to stroke the arrogant ego of newly rich man. Alexander started criticizing the dinners I cooked, the way I raised Leo, and finally, he started criticizing me openly. That 3-story house in Lincoln Park was glamorous on the outside, but inside, its walls were rotting day by day, hour by hour. I tried to hold on to him, tried to change my appearance, tried to endure my mother-in-law, all just to keep the family together for Leo. The boy loved his dad so much. Every time Alexander came home, even if he was drunk, Leo would hug his legs and tell him stories from kindergarten. I thought a child's love would be the final thread holding on to whatever conscience Alexander had left. But I was wrong. I was completely wrong. When a person is blinded by money and lust, they are not only willing to abandon their lifelong spouse, but also to act cruelly against their own flesh and blood to clear the path to a new, unattached life. That rot reached its peak on that fateful day, the day my son was pushed into the abyss between life and death. Dr. Miller's words were like a master key that pulled back the curtain of fog covering Leo's accident. I leaned against the hospital window frame and closed my eyes. The memories of that dark Tuesday afternoon came flooding back, sharp and chilling down to the smallest detail. That day began with a falsely peaceful morning. Leo was wearing his favorite yellow superhero t-shirt and his little backpack. He stood on his tiptoes to kiss me on the cheek before getting in the car for Alexander to take him to school. We have to pour concrete on the 3rd floor of the site today. I'll be supervising all day. Figure out how to pick up the kid this afternoon. I won't make it in time, Alexander said. Okay. My company has an internal audit today, but I'll ask my boss to let me leave early. At 4:30. To go get Leo. Be careful at work and don't forget to eat a real lunch. Alexander just grunted and sped off. I had no idea that this was the first meticulous setup in a series of atrocious acts. Around 3:00 p.m., while I was buried in a mountain of invoices at the office, my phone rang. It was Vanessa. At that time, in my contacts list, she was still just his real estate assistant. Hi Anna, it's Vanessa. Alexander just called me, says he's swamped at the site and mentioned you also have an audit. Since I'm heading to see a client right near Leo's school, I'll pick him up and take him home. Okay? I'll buy him some juice and a pastry. You can stay and finish your work. At that moment, I was genuinely buried in work, and my boss was standing next to me, demanding urgent data. Hearing Vanessa's helpful, enthusiastic tone, I suspected absolutely nothing. I agreed and gave her the pickup code. That was the most misguided, painful decision of my entire life. A decision I will regret until the day I die. Around 4:15 p.m., my phone vibrated again. This time it wasn't a helpful voice, but Vanessa's panicked screams. "Anna, get to the hospital right now." Leo. Leo fell from the second-floor balcony onto the patio. I called 911 and brought him in. "He's bleeding so much." "Oh my God." My heart stopped. The phone crashed to the floor. I don't remember how I left the office or how I screamed my son's name in the cab. When I burst into the ER, the scene was chaotic and bloody. The yellow superhero shirt was shredded and stained dark red. My boy lay there, fragile and tiny, his head bandaged in a corner of the hallway. Vanessa covered her face, sobbing. She looked like a profoundly terrified and remorseful woman. "I'm so sorry, Anna." I picked him up and left him in the living room watching TV. Then I went down to the kitchen to peel some fruit for him. I don't know why he went up to the second floor and climbed the railing. I just heard a loud thud, and when I went outside, he was on the patio. "I'm sorry, I really didn't mean for this to happen." Alexander appeared right after. He wasn't wearing work clothes, nor was he covered in dust like someone who had just come from a construction site. He wore a crisp shirt, his hair was slicked back, and he still smelled of expensive cologne. In that moment, I was so desperate for my son that I didn't pay attention to those little details. Alexander ran up to grab me and yelled, "What kind of mother are you? All you had to do was pick up your son, and out of sheer laziness, you let a stranger do it. If you had left work early, this wouldn't have happened. Look at him. If anything happens to my son, I will never forgive you." I collapsed to the floor, crying uncontrollably, accepting all the blame. I was convinced that because of my obsession with work, my son had suffered a tragic accident. But a few days later, when Leo's condition stabilized enough to be moved to the ICU, I went home to grab some clothes for him. I walked into that empty, freezing house and went straight up to the second-floor balcony, the supposed scene of the accident. Standing in front of the glass railing, a wave of suspicion began to sprout in my mind. The balcony railing of our house was very high, over 4 feet tall, with a smooth stainless steel handrail. Leo was only 6 and barely 3.5 feet tall. How could a child grip that slippery glass to pull himself over a railing taller than he was? Moreover, Leo was terrified of heights. Just looking down the stairs made him scream to be picked up. Why would such a fearful kid suddenly run to a lonely balcony, climb to the top, and fall? I leaned over to look around the balcony. Leo's house slippers were neatly lined up against the wall, with no signs of a struggle or a hasty slip. I went down to the living room and looked at the small glass coffee table. There was a juice box with a straw in it. The boy had drank half of it. Next to it was an untouched plate of fruit. I remembered the words Dr. Miller had just said. High-dose sedative. Suddenly, everything clicked in a chilling, terribly logical way. Vanessa had picked Leo up and given him the juice laced with sedatives. When the drug took effect, Leo's nervous system paralyzed. The boy became drowsy, losing control of his movements and his ability to resist. In that state, all she had to do was scoop up a limp child, place him over the railing, and let go. The free fall from the second floor would be camouflaged as a tragic accident caused by a hyperactive kid. Alexander was never at the construction site. He was with Vanessa, or at least he knew the plan perfectly beforehand. That was why he arrived at the hospital looking so sharp and instantly blamed me, to deflect attention. They had orchestrated a perfect attempted murder to get rid of the child, pave the way for a divorce, seize my assets, and officially be together. They weren't human, they were demons in disguise. I clenched my fists, digging my nails into my palms until they bled. In this game, it was my turn to take control. Standing in the middle of the empty house, I shuddered as I put all the puzzle pieces together. The image of Vanessa became clearer than ever in my mind. Her appearance in Alexander's life and in this family was never a coincidence. It was a meticulously laid trap, aimed directly at the greed and ego of a newly rich man with a hollow foundation. At first, Vanessa approached Alexander under the guise of a real estate agent, helping him find land to build a new warehouse. But she wasn't just selling land, she was selling that fake empathy that men like Alexander always crave. He was a macho man who wanted to be the center of the universe. At home, I always advised him to be prudent with spending and strictly manage the company's finances, since I was an accountant. I saw the financial holes he tried to plug with risky loans. My sincere advice to Alexander was just the nagging of a wife holding back a great CEO. And Vanessa caught on to that perfectly. She never advised him to save. She flattered him, painting scenarios of investments that would yield millions. She treated him like a king at fancy parties, pouring sweet words into his ears to inflate his complacency to the point of delusion. Look at other people. A modern wife should know how to support her husband's career from behind the scenes, go out and network to make him look good. Vanessa just introduced me to some land investments in the suburbs. If we flip them in a few months, we'll double our money. And you? Always sticking your nose into little water and electric bills. Your vision will never go past the kitchen walls. Those were the words Alexander spat in my face at a dinner 4 months ago when I discovered he had arbitrarily withdrawn $150,000 from our joint account to hand over to Vanessa as an investment. I tried to stop him. I cried, begging him to get that money back because it was the savings we planned to use to pay off the mortgage on our house. But Alexander didn't listen. He was completely manipulated by her, convinced she was his lucky charm. Vanessa was very sly. She didn't jump right in to usurp the role of the wife. She immediately played the role of the adopted little sister, the efficient assistant, always calling me sweetly whenever she came to our house. She bought gifts for Leo and expensive vitamins for my mother-in-law. With that malicious cunning, she bought Teresa completely. The quiet ones are the worst. The suburban land in Milwaukee that Alexander invested in was a ghost project, a sophisticated scam Vanessa had plotted with outside accomplices to drain his money. When the $150,000 vanished, Alexander's company was left on the brink of bankruptcy, hounded by creditors with the bank breathing down his neck. Instead of confessing to me, he went back to Vanessa for help, and that was when she hatched the plan to seize all my assets and my son's. The townhouse in Lincoln Park, where we lived, was jointly owned. My name was on the deed too. If he wanted to sell it to pay his debts or flee with the cash, Alexander needed my signature. But I would never agree to sell my son's only home to pay for his partying and vices. Alexander, Anna is too stubborn, she'll never sign off on selling the house. The law says if you get divorced now, the judge will give her the house because she has custody of the kid. We'll never be able to sell it. But if, God forbid, the kid doesn't make it, she'll lose the legal right to stay in the home. You could force her to sell, split the assets, and we'd have more than enough money to move to another country. We can't let ourselves drown here. I didn't hear those demonic whispers with my own ears, but now, stringing all the details together, I could say with certainty that this was their plan. That townhouse was worth over $1.5 million. They knew perfectly well that the only way to kick me out of my own home and liquidate that asset was by eliminating the person who gave me the legal right to live there, my own son. If the boy died, they could use the excuse of the accident to force the immediate sale of the house. Furthermore, by blaming me for failing to watch my son, Alexander would use it as a moral weapon, forcing me to sign the divorce and hand over the house under the pressure of my mother-in-law and his relatives. A cruel plan, perfect down to the last crack. Not only did they want to rob us, but they also wanted to snatch the life of an innocent 6-year-old boy to gain freedom and money. My heart tore as if someone were hacking at it with a knife. Vanessa had used the malevolence of a professional gold digger to plant evil in Alexander's head. And he, a father, a husband, out of cowardice, greed, and lust, allied with his mistress to kill his own blood. This cruelty wasn't a crime of passion, it was meticulously planned. They chose the day I was busiest, the moment no one was home, and used a sedative to strip a child of his defenses. I stood on the balcony, the freezing wind hitting my face, the tears rolling down my cheeks, no longer tasted of the salty weakness of self-pity, they had thickened with the taste of hatred. They thought I was just a stupid woman who only knew how to cry and resign herself. They thought the trap had worked perfectly, and they could peacefully board their plane, fly to the Maldives, and live it up on the blood of my son and me. But they were wrong. No matter how smart they thought they were, divine justice exists. Heaven had left my son with one last breath, and had left me the evidence provided by a dedicated doctor. They had pushed me to the bottom of hell, but I would use the fire of that very hell to reduce their filthy future to ashes. Vanessa's arrival was a nightmare, but that nightmare would teach me to become a mother willing to do whatever it took to get justice for her child. Back in the ICU, the hospital corridor at midnight was eerily quiet. The pale white fluorescent light reflected off the floor, creating a cold, solitary atmosphere. I sat hugging my knees in a hard plastic chair, my gaze fixed on the closed glass door of the room. The sound of the ventilator and the heart monitor inside emitted dry, monotonous beeps intermittently. Every beep that echoed was another squeeze on my heart. At that hour, Alexander and Vanessa were surely sitting in the business class cabin of their red-eye flight, raising glasses of champagne to celebrate their perfect plan. They would be yearning for the white sand beaches and the luxury of Malay. Meanwhile, I was here counting every agonizing breath of my 6-year-old son, suspended on the border between life and death. I shakily pulled my phone from my purse and called a criminal defense attorney who had been recommended to me. I needed him to urgently initiate legal proceedings first thing in the morning to freeze Alexander's assets and investigate what really happened at my house. The lawyer asked for a $2,000 retainer to start moving immediately, a sum I thought I had more than enough of. I opened my banking app to wire him the money. My personal checking account only had a little over $200 left. I quickly switched to the joint savings account in Alexander and my name, where I kept the $25,000 I had worked so hard to save. The screen loaded for a few seconds and then displayed a figure that left me paralyzed. Available balance, $0. The transaction history clearly showed that the entire $25,000 had been wired by Alexander to an unknown account under the name Lauren Vanessa's real name. At 5:00 p.m. that same day, right before coming to the hospital to throw the divorce in my face, they not only conspired to kill my son and steal my house, but they had also drained every last penny from the family to fund their dirty trip. Fury overtook me. I bit my lips until they bled. They had cornered my family into a dead end, wanting to cut off any hope of medical treatment for Leo. I stood by the billing counter, crying. The cashier looked at me with pity, but she couldn't bypass hospital policy. I backed away with trembling hands, scrolling through the contacts on my phone. At 1:00 a.m. Who could I borrow from? My parents back in our hometown were old and frail. They had painstakingly saved a little money for their retirement. I couldn't call them with bad news in the middle of the night. They might have a heart attack from the shock. As a last resort, I called Teresa. As cruel as she was, Leo was still the firstborn grandson of the family. I trusted that faced with the life or death of her own blood, she would soften. Hello? Why are you calling me at this hour? You can't even let older people sleep. Teresa, I'm begging you. I urgently need $15,000 to pay a lawyer and some private specialists to evaluate Leo's case. I suspect his fall wasn't an accident. Alexander emptied our joint account. Lend me the money, and tomorrow morning I'll borrow from friends to pay you back. I beg you. Lend to you? You are his mother and you've been working for years. Where have you hidden your money that you come crying to me now? Alexander invested all his money in the business, and I don't have my retirement savings to give to you. I told you that pregnancy never brought any luck. He fell like that, and even if he's saved, he'll be useless. He'll be a burden on this house. Why do you insist? Tell the doctor to pull the plug so we can be rid of this burden. A knot formed in my throat, and I couldn't articulate a single word. Pull the plug, those were the words of a grandmother. She preferred to let her grandson die to save money, to avoid carrying a weight, rather than taking out a few grand to save his life. My husband's entire family were cold-blooded monsters. There was not a trace of humanity left in that rotten bloodline. Come on, stop acting. Alexander has already decided to leave you. Even if you get on your knees, I won't give you a dime. Deal with the consequences of your own incompetence. The disconnected dial tone sounded cold in my ear. I lowered the phone slowly. My heart was no longer bleeding, it had frozen completely. A terrifying silence invaded my mind. I wouldn't cry anymore. Tears couldn't save my son. Weakness couldn't avenge my son. They wanted to corner me. They wanted me to fall defeated under their contempt, but they underestimated a mother's instinct. When a mother is pushed to the limit, she can become more ruthless and calculating than any enemy. I opened my phone again and went on social media. Vanessa had just posted a new photo. 2 glasses of wine on the glass table in the airplane's business class with a sweet caption. A new beginning in paradise, leaving the old, rotten life behind. I stared at that photo, burning every word, every image into my mind. Enjoy. Drink all you want, your paradise will only last 3 days. That sleepless night, I sat outside the ICU door without blinking for a second. I was like a wounded animal licking its wounds, silently sharpening my claws, waiting for dawn to begin a relentless revenge. At 9:00 a.m., I left the hospital and went straight to a pawn shop in uptown Chicago that had just opened its doors. I took off the gold necklace my mother gave me on my wedding day and then the wedding band from my finger. That ring, with which Alexander had kneeled before me 8 years ago, was no longer a symbol of love to me, it was just a useless piece of metal. The clerk looked at me with pity, seeing a haggard woman with swollen eyes, pawning her jewelry first thing in the morning. He gave me $2,000. I clutched the bills in my hand and wired them to the lawyer. On the morning of the second day since Leo fell into a coma, the hospital corridor began to fill with the noise of footsteps and conversations from patients' families. I remained slumped outside the glass door, like a dry branch, waiting for any gust of wind to snap it. I hadn't slept a wink all night, staring at the blinking light of my son's heart monitor. All that spun in my head was Leo's smile from that morning and the cold divorce papers Alexander had thrown in my face. I hadn't fully recovered when a group of relatives approached from the elevators. Leading the pack was Teresa. She was followed by the 2 aunts, the same ones who, at baptisms and communions, always praised me for being an exemplary wife and daughter-in-law. But today, their expressions were completely different. Teresa walked up without even glancing into the patient's room, crossed her arms, and looked me up and down. Her sharp eyes overflowed with disdain. What good does it do for you to sit there like a piece of furniture? Is the boy going to wake up? You're a jinx. Ever since you entered this house, you've brought nothing but misfortune. You can't even pick up your own son. You let him fall and crack his head open. And now you sit here crying. Who are you trying to make feel sorry for you? An aunt next to her played along, dragging out every syllable loudly so everyone around could hear. Women who obsess over work and neglect their children don't deserve to be mothers. Look at Alexander, working day and night at the construction site to support you. You stay home enjoying life and you can't even watch a kid. Now he's in a vegetative state and not even all the money in the world will cure him. And on top of that, I hear you refuse to sign the divorce. Do you plan to tie Alexander down so he carries this dead weight his whole life? Their words were like poisoned arrows straight to my heart. I looked up at those faces that claimed to be my son's blood family. Their grandson was hovering between life and death. And yet, the only thing they cared about was not the child's safety, but how to kick me out of the house and how to protect the money and future of their precious son. Society is sometimes ridiculously cruel. When a family is at peace and the man has money, he is praised. When something happens to the children, all the blame falls on the mother, regardless of the true cause. Teresa, Leo is my son, but he also carries your blood. You may not love him, but how can you say such cruel words when the boy is dying in there? Are you trying to force me to sign so Alexander can legally sell the house and spend the money with his mistress? Teresa's eyes went wide. She pointed her finger in my face, and her shrill voice echoed down the hallway. Don't you dare talk like that. If Alexander has someone else, it's because you didn't know how to keep him, because you birthed a sickly, useless kid. Vanessa is pregnant with a boy, a healthy son who will bring luck to my son's career. You and the boy lying in there are nothing but a burden. If you have any common sense, pack your bags and leave. Don't force us to get the lawyers involved. That house belongs to my son. You won't get a single dime." I stood up abruptly. My legs were shaking from exhaustion, but I kept my back straight. I wasn't crying anymore. My tears had dried up the night before. I looked my mother-in-law dead in the eyes, pronouncing every word slowly, but as sharp as broken glass. Half of that house was paid for by my parents, and it holds 6 years of my sweat working double shifts to pay the mortgage. You say Vanessa is expecting a boy who will bring luck. Wait and see if that luck lifts Alexander to the heavens or pushes your whole family to the bottom of the abyss. Tell Alexander I will not sign a single paper until what happened to Leo is cleared up. Oh, look how insolent she is. What a piece of work. We'll see how long your arrogance lasts. Stay with that cripple and go live under a bridge." The group turned away indignantly, cursing as they left. They called me shameless and brazen. I stood frozen, gripping the chair tightly. They had decided to be ruthless. They had repudiated their own blood for a woman they had just met and a fetus that didn't even have a form yet. They called me a jinx. They called Leo a burden. But they didn't know that Vanessa and Alexander were the true monsters who had tried to steal the future of their own blood. The hospital hallway murmured. Looks of pity and curiosity landed on me, but I didn't care. I turned back to look through the transparent glass, where Leo remained in a deep sleep. My son, I will not give up. Their gossip will only fuel my strength. I will stay here waiting for the third day, waiting for those medical reports to become the sentence that destroys those demons. Let them be proud. Let them think they have cornered me, because in this chess game, he who laughs last, laughs best. 3 days passed, slow and painful, like an entire century. During those 3 days, I survived on milk cartons and pieces of stale bread the nurses offered me out of pity. My eyes were ringed with dark circles, my hair disheveled, and my whole body exhausted from the lack of sleep and constant vigilance. In those 3 days, Alexander didn't call me once, nor did he send a single message to ask if his son was alive or dead. Through mutual friends, I learned that he and Vanessa were staying at a 5-star resort in the Maldives. They were posting photos, having candlelight dinners, and buying designer clothes, squandering the money. Alexander's cruelty had reached an inhuman level. On the morning of the 3rd day, just when I had managed to close my eyes for a moment on the bench, a nurse ran up to me and shook my shoulder. "Doctor, Miller was asking me to go to the floor's main conference room, not his private office, but the conference room." My maternal instinct told me the decisive moment had arrived. I quickly smoothed my hair, washed my face with cold water in the public restrooms. Miller. The hospital administrator was there, along with 2 plainclothes detectives from the Chicago Police Department. The atmosphere was solemn and thick with tension. The doctor invited me to sit across from him. On the table were 2 thick, sealed files. "Mrs. Anna, we have the official forensic results. Prepare yourself, because what we are going to announce doesn't just concern little Leo's condition, but also a medical truth about your husband. Doctors, detectives, please speak. I've been preparing for the worst for 3 days. Is my son going to live?" The doctor sighed in relief and offered a rare, comforting smile. "That is the first piece of good news. Leo has passed the critical phase. The sedative in his blood is flushing out well thanks to the continuous filtration protocol. Although his brain suffered trauma from the impact, fortunately, his central nervous system is recovering. He could wake up in the next 24 to 48 hours. I broke down sobbing uncontrollably. For the first time after so many dark days, I cried out of relief and happiness. My son was alive. My Leo had stubbornly survived. I clasped my hands and bowed my head, repeatedly thanking the doctors, but my newborn joy was halted by the stern expression of the 2 detectives. "Ma'am, the good news is that the boy survived," one of the detectives said. "But the bad news for whoever hurt him is that the results confirm the level of diazepam in the child's blood was 10 times the permitted dose for an adult. This drug was dissolved in stomach fluids, specifically in juice. This completely matches your suspicions about the juice box found at the scene. The CPD has opened a criminal case for attempted murder. My chest heaved. The crime had been discovered. Vanessa wouldn't escape, and Alexander, as an accessory or accomplice, would also face justice. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. Detectives, the person who picked up my son that day was Vanessa, my husband's mistress. They are currently vacationing in the Maldives. They did this to force me to divorce him and let them take the house, since she claims to be pregnant with my husband's child. At that moment, the second detective cleared his throat softly. He pulled a second police file from his briefcase. Mrs. Anna. This is the second turning point. To establish the motive for the attempted homicide and the fraud, a judge authorized us to run a trace on all your husband's accounts and personal files. During the search, we found a hidden medical report in the safe at his office, issued by a private fertility clinic here in Chicago 8 months ago. I frowned, completely confused. A fertility clinic 8 months ago? Alexander had told me he was on a business trip in Milwaukee because he had a fertility report? And what did that have to do with the case? The detective opened the file directly and pointed to the private clinic's conclusion on the last page. Look at it yourself. The diagnosis from 8 months ago concludes that Alexander suffers from idiopathic azoospermia, meaning he has absolutely zero sperm in his semen due to complications from testicular atrophy. It is absolute sterility. He cannot have children naturally, and even the chances with medical interventions are less than 1%. I froze, as if struck by lightning. Absolute sterility. If Alexander had been sterile for 8 months, then the fetus in Vanessa's belly, the boy she and my mother-in-law proudly bragged about. Whose was it? Do you understand what this means, right? The doctor continued. Your husband has been the victim of a massive scam. His mistress is not pregnant with his child. She faked the pregnancy to extort him, force a divorce, take his assets, and even more cruelly, she incited him to kill his only biological son. He destroyed his own family for another man's bastard. The room fell into a dead silence. I sat petrified in the chair until a muffled laugh escaped my throat. A bitter, resentful laugh, but full of absolute satisfaction. Karma. Karma had arrived swiftly and brutally, but completely fairly. Alexander had repudiated me and Leo, breaking his marriage vows to chase a young mistress, thinking he'd get an heir and a massive fortune. Yet, he was nothing but a stupid puppet manipulated by a gold digger who had put a pair of horns on his head so big he wouldn't even be able to look up. God sees everything. Cruel people always think they're the smartest, but they end up dying by their own greed and stupidity. I gripped the file in my hands. All right. You're very happy in the Maldives, aren't you, Alexander? Well, enjoy it, because when you step off that plane, what will be waiting for you won't be a new house, but a conviction for attempted murder and the most humiliating truth a macho man like you could ever endure. The play was now reaching its climax. With the medical report in hand, I walked out into the hallway and found the most secluded corner near the stairwell. The wind, blowing through the window, carried the chill of the impending Chicago winter, but my inside burned with a relentless fire. I looked at my phone screen. I still had the photo Vanessa posted a few hours ago. In it, she wore a provocative bikini, resting her head on Alexander's shoulder under the dazzling Maldives sun. They were immersed in an illusory happiness built on my son's blood. Dr. Miller was right. I didn't need to wait 3 days for him to return. I wanted to deliver the finishing blow myself while he was at the peak of his satisfaction, so he would feel what it was like to plummet straight to the bottom of hell. I unlocked my screen and called Alexander on WhatsApp. It rang a long time. The ringback tone was a sickly sweet romantic song Vanessa had surely made him set. I waited patiently, my heart rate steady, with unusual calm. On the 5th ring, the call connected. From the other side, the sound of ocean waves, background music, and feminine giggles reached my ears with total clarity. What's wrong? What are you calling me for? If you've already signed the divorce papers, take them to the courthouse and stop ruining my vacation. Or did the kid die, and you want me to come back for the funeral? I'm warning you, I don't have time. Call my mother and figure it out yourselves. The words coming from that father's mouth were so cold and ruthless that if I were the same woman from 3 days ago, I probably would have broken down and started screaming. But now, I only smiled with contempt. Alexander, you'll be disappointed to know Leo hasn't died. The doctor just informed me he's past the critical phase and is about to wake up. The sedatives your mistress mixed into his juice weren't enough to take his life. What? What kind of nonsense are you talking about? What sedatives? You're crazy. Don't give me your lies. You made the kid fall, and now you're blaming others. I'm warning you, I'll sue you for defamation. Who is it, honey? Vanessa's shrill, baby-like voice cut into the line. Ugh, please. Why are you listening to that crazy woman? Hang up, come swim with me. The water is amazing. I could sense the panic in Alexander's voice, but he was still trying to act tough. I took a deep breath and hardened my tone, articulating every word carefully to make sure he didn't miss a single one. Let her swim, because soon she'll be swimming in a prison cell. The Forensics Institute already has the results of Leo's blood test. The CPD has opened a case for attempted murder. But anyway, we'll leave that to the justice system. The main reason for my call today is to give you an exclusive gift to celebrate your trip. Alexander, what are you playing at? Don't try to scare me, I haven't done anything wrong. Open your WhatsApp chat, I just sent you some photos, look at them closely, especially the conclusion printed in red on the last page. I stayed silent, waiting. About 10 seconds later, I heard Alexander gasp and a loud thud, as if someone had dropped something on the sand. What? What is this? Where did you get this fake document? When have I ever been tested in urology? What is this about absolute sterility, you liar? You hired someone to forge a medical record to ruin my happiness with Vanessa, didn't you? Look closely at the hospital's stamp. 8 months ago, that week you told me you were going on a business trip to Milwaukee. You were actually admitted to this hospital to get surgery for a complication from testicular atrophy. You hid it from me. You hid it from everyone because of your ridiculous macho pride. Dr. Miller was the one who treated you. If you don't have a single sperm, the baby your precious Vanessa is carrying is the work of the Holy Ghost. No, it can't be. Vanessa, get over here. Get over here right now. Whose damn kid is this? God damn it, you played me. What's wrong with you? Let me go. You're hurting me. What did that bitch send you for you to believe it blindly? You believe a crazy woman over your future wife? This child is yours. It's the fruit of our love. Don't listen to her, she just wants to tear us apart. Through the phone, I clearly heard the struggle. Alexander roared like a wounded beast, while Vanessa screamed and cried, denying everything. Alexander's arrogance and triumph had completely crumbled. He had always been an extremely proud man who boasted of his manhood. Discovering he was sterile must have been a lethal blow he had to hide. Now, bitterly realizing he had been cheated on and was going to raise another man's kid, that feeling of humiliation must have hurt more than 1,000 stab wounds. Shut up, it's written in black and white. The hospital confirms I am absolutely sterile. And you still have the nerve to deny it? You sleep with someone else and want me to foot the bill, you tramp? You pushed me to abandon my wife and son, to do horrible things so I could marry you, and it turns out you're just a con artist. I'll kill you. The insults and blows echoed thunderously. I heard glass shattering and Vanessa's blood-curdling screams begging the hotel staff for help. Standing in the middle of the hospital hallway, listening to that chaotic noise coming from a place thousands of miles away, a freezing smile drew across my lips. The farce they had worked so hard to stage had come to an end in the worst possible way. Enjoy your vacation, my dear ex-husband. Don't take too long to come back. The police, the divorce papers, and an indictment for attempted murder are waiting for you at home. Don't make the law issue an international arrest warrant. That would only make your facade as a CEO sink even lower. I hung up sharply and coldly. I didn't need to hear any more begging or insults. My heart now felt light. A strange sense of satisfaction washed over my body. I had stripped away what mattered most to him, his ego and his faith in the future. He had destroyed his own family and tried to murder his only son, only to receive a massive pair of horns and be left empty-handed. That was the price to pay for such cruel betrayal. I turned back toward the ICU as my mind began plotting the next steps to put Vanessa and Alexander in prison, leaving them no chance to escape the punishment of the law. After hanging up, I knew I couldn't settle for a momentary victory. Psychologically, Alexander was broken, but the nature of a corrupt businessman might make him try to dodge responsibility for Leo's fall and pin all the blame on Vanessa. And Vanessa, with her cunning as a professional scammer, would surely look for an escape route or invent another story to play the victim. I needed to gather all the evidence about her true identity, her fake pregnancy, and the person pulling the strings behind this whole plot to rob my husband's family. I immediately called Nora. She was my best friend from college. Nora wasn't just a friend, she was also an experienced private investigator specializing in infidelity and fraud cases in Chicago. From the moment I had a gut feeling that Leo's accident wasn't normal, I asked her to discreetly tail Vanessa's every move. The call connected quickly. Hello? Anna, how is Leo? I've been a nervous wreck all morning, but I didn't dare call in case you were busy. Leo is out of danger. Nora, the doctor says he'll wake up today or tomorrow, but we'll talk about that later. What did you find out about Vanessa? She's in the Maldives with Alexander. I just dropped the bomb about his sterility, so they'd tear each other apart. Now I need hard evidence to lock that woman up before she can flee. You moved that fast? Relax, I've got that woman cornered. Just like you suspected, she's not just a nobody. Sit down. Listen to what I'm about to tell you. Through Nora's words, Miss Vanessa's profile was laid bare. She didn't come from a good family, nor was she an expert real estate agent. Her real name was Lauren. She came from a ring of grifters that targeted new money or lustful men. Her tactic consisted of playing the good girl and offering fake investments to bleed her victims dry. And the most chilling part, the pregnancy she carried was a spectacular fraud. You know what, Anna? I reached out to some contacts at the private maternity clinic where she used to tag herself and post photos on social media. The doctor confirmed she is not pregnant. All the ultrasounds and medical records she showed Alexander are fake, photoshopped. She bought a silicone belly like the ones actresses use. Since Alexander was always traveling, and when he came back, she made excuses so he wouldn't touch her, claiming she was on bed rest. He never realized it. I listened to this feeling chills. Her level of sophistication and villainy surpassed anything I had imagined. A silicone belly and some fake medical papers had been enough to blind my entire in-law family and enough to push a cold-blooded man to act atrociously against his own son. And that's not all, Anna. This chick doesn't work alone. She has a real boyfriend named Marcus, nicknamed Scar, a thug from the South Side who works as a debt collector and muscle. This guy is the brains behind the whole operation. I managed to access a secret account of Lauren's on social media. It's full of messages between her and Marcus planning everything. They had a very clear timeline. They would wait for Alexander to force you to divorce him. You'd sell the townhouse, and they'd collect Leo's life insurance payout. Then they'd flee the country with all the money. This trip to the Maldives was just an excuse for Lauren to buy time and wire the rest of Alexander's cash to an offshore account Marcus controls. I had a bitter taste in my throat. It turned out that my son, myself, and my husband's entire family were just juicy prey in a meticulously prepared chess match. Alexander always bragged about being smart and having vision, but in the end, he was played like a puppet by a woman and a street thug. Thinking of my mother-in-law, always pampering Lauren, buying her artisanal gifts and vitamins for that silicone belly full of air, I felt both laughter and pity for her ignorance. Did you save all those messages and evidence? Email them to me right now. I'll print them out and hand them directly to the detectives. Along with Dr. Miller's sedative results, they won't be able to escape. I already made 3 backups. I'm sending them now. But be careful, Anna. Marcus doesn't mess around. If he finds out the plan has been discovered, he might act desperate. Don't leave the hospital areas with cameras and people. I'll ask some buddies at CPD to swing by and keep an eye out. Gadav CPD, thanks, Nora. I'm not afraid of them. My son and I have already been to death's door. I have nothing left to lose. I'm just waiting for Alexander to show his humiliated face around here so I can hammer the final nail into the coffin of his honor myself. Hanging up, I opened my email, downloading all the photos, texts, and forged documents of Lauren's onto my phone. Reading how they planned to mix the sedative into the juice and how they were going to place Leo on the railing so it looked like a natural fall, I felt a sharp pain in my chest, as if chunks of flesh were being ripped out with a knife. My tears fell again, but this time, they were tears of absolute determination. I walked slowly toward the ICU door. Leo, my sweet boy, wake up soon. Mommy won't let the people who hurt you live in peace. I will make them kneel at your feet to pay for their crimes. The play had been exposed to the light, and now it was time for those monsters to pay the ultimate price for their cruelty. Nearly 12 hours after my call to the Maldives, I was still sitting motionless in the waiting chairs of the hospital's main lobby. Outside, night had fallen. The streetlights cast pale streaks across the large windows. Next to me were the 2 plainclothes detectives. Along with the file of evidence Nora had sent me, Dr. Miller had just given me news that made my heart explode with joy. Leo's heart rate and brain waves were responding favorably. He could open his eyes at any moment. I intertwined my hands and took a deep breath to dispel the exhaustion. This battle was coming to an end, and I needed to keep a cool head and the haughtiest posture to receive the traitor. The sliding glass doors of the lobby opened wide, and from the outside, a man ran in frantically. His appearance was so pathetic that, without looking closely, it would have been hard to recognize the dignified CEO from a few days ago. It was Alexander. He was no longer wearing a pressed suit, but a wrinkled, sweaty t-shirt. His hair was a mess, and his bloodshot eyes showed panic, insomnia, and contained rage. Alexander looked around erratically until his gaze landed on me. He ran toward me like a rabid beast cornered in a dead end. Anna? Where is the boy? Tell me the truth, please. The medical report is fake, right? Tell me you're messing with me. Lauren is gone. She fled with the money as soon as we landed. There's not a dime left on my card. Help me, Anna. Tell me this is all just a joke. I sat there without moving an inch, my icy gaze sweeping over his pathetic appearance. Just 3 days ago, this same man had stood outside the ICU, throwing divorce papers at me and uttering the cruelest words so he could run off with his mistress. And now, after discovering he had been cheated on and robbed, he came crawling back to his wife and son with that humiliated face. Life isn't that easy, Alexander. Do you think I have so much free time that I'd joke with my dignity and my pain? Look at yourself. You thought you were the great CEO, you bragged about being smart and visionary, and in the end, a con artist left you in your underwear. Your sterility record has been at this hospital for 8 months. You fooled yourself, and then blamed it all on me. Now that you have nothing, you remember the son you wanted to pull the plug on? I messed up, Anna. I messed up 1,000 times. That bitch bewitched me. She convinced me to divorce you, to sell the house. I didn't know anything about Leo's accident. It was her. She tried to kill him. You have to believe me. I'm his father. Tell the police to leave me alone. I'll start over. I'll make it up to both of you. I let out a laugh, a bitter laugh that echoed through the cold hospital lobby. The wicked, when cornered, always looked to blame others. He was such a coward, he didn't even dare face his own crimes. Shut up. You have no right to utter the word father. You say you didn't know anything? The tests show high doses of sedatives in Leo's blood. They were mixed into his juice, and before the accident, you were the one who bought the drugs on the black market online. My friend hacked your entire chat history. You and that woman planned how to put him to sleep and throw him from the second floor. You were going to use your son's death to collect the $300,000 life insurance policy and run away. You're not human, you're a monster. At that moment, my mother-in-law and her aunt rushed in through the hospital doors. She had heard Alexander was flying back to Chicago urgently and had rushed over in a cab. Seeing Alexander kneeling at my feet, Teresa lunged forward, raising her hand as if she were going to grab my clothes to scream at me, as was her custom. "You shameless bitch. What have you done to make my son get on his knees? Get up, Alexander. If she won't sign the divorce, throw her out on the street. That house is yours. You don't have to beg her for anything. Vanessa is going to give me a baby boy. Bring her here. I'll throw this bad mother out myself." I sprang up, grabbed the file full of photos and messages, and slammed it onto the steel table in front of her. "Open your eyes and look at this. Take a good look at that baby boy you were so eager for. Your beloved daughter-in-law wears a fake silicone belly. She's a professional con artist and her boyfriend is a thug. They allied with your precious son to poison Leo, kick me out of the house, and then they stole all your son's money and fled. Your son has been absolutely sterile for 8 months. He can never have children. Karma has fallen on this family, do you understand now?" Teresa stared at the photos of Vanessa hugging the thug named Marcus Scar. She saw the medical certificate of sterility, and then she looked at her only son, who was crying inconsolably and pathetically on the floor. She stepped back several paces, her legs trembled, and she collapsed onto the tiles. She opened her mouth, but couldn't articulate a word. Her pride in her son's success, her yearning for a grandson to show off to the neighbors, everything had shattered. She clutched her chest, breathing heavily, eyes wide open, looking at Alexander with absolute shock and despair. The 2 plainclothes detectives who had been watching stepped forward, pulled out their badges, and read the arrest warrant with a firm voice. "Alexander, you are under arrest for the suspected crimes of attempted murder and insurance fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Please come with us to the precinct. We have gathered all the relevant evidence. No, I didn't want to kill my son. It was her. Arrest her. Lauren tricked me. She pushed me to do it. Mom, help me. Tell Anna to drop the charges. I don't want to go to prison. Mom." Alexander's heartbreaking pleas echoed throughout the hospital lobby, but no one took pity on him. My mother-in-law, sitting on the floor, beat her chest, crying bitterly, blaming herself for having been blind, for having invited a viper into her home that ended up hurting her grandson and putting her son behind bars. I crossed my arms, coldly watching as the handcuffs clicked closed around Alexander's wrists. That man who had once stood tall outside the ICU, trampling on his son's life, now had to hang his head and drag his feet in humiliation. Justice had finally spoken, and his family's dirty farce was officially closed. In the days that followed, once Alexander was arraigned, the storm swept away the last remnants of that traitorous family. The press and public opinion shuddered at the news that the CEO of a construction company had conspired with his mistress to drug and push his 6-year-old son from a balcony to collect a $300,000 life insurance policy. Society's outrage poured over him. His company immediately lost all its contracts with partners. Shareholders withdrew their funds, and creditors showed up at the headquarters. In less than a week, the empire Alexander bragged so much about filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, leaving massive debts impossible to pay. The net of justice is vast and lets no one escape. Lauren and her thug Marcus thought they could flee with the stolen cash, but they underestimated the authorities. As soon as Alexander confessed to the whole plan, federal warrants were issued and accounts were frozen. They were caught at the Canadian border trying to cross into Ontario. The assets they had stolen from Alexander's account were frozen in time for the investigation and for civil damages. At the precinct, Lauren no longer kept up her refined lady act. She cried buckets and threw all the blame on Marcus and Alexander. But the evidence, texts, transaction history, and cross-testimonies tied them to the crimes of fraud and conspiracy to commit murder. As for Teresa, the massive shock broke her completely. From being a critical woman, always judging and looking down on her daughter-in-law, she turned into a pale, decrepit shadow. She had to sell the house downstate to pay the urgent debts Alexander had taken out in her name. Her only son, whom she had on a pedestal, was now facing decades in prison. The neighbors turned their backs on her, and her own relatives cut ties with her for being unable to accept someone who tried to murder their own blood. She now lives alone in a tiny rented room, sick and with no support from anyone, repenting bitterly. But all repentance arrived too late. For me, all the punishments they received didn't bring me as much happiness as the moment I experienced on the morning of the 5th day in the intensive care unit. That day, the first rays of winter sun came through the hospital window and illuminated Leo's thin face. I was sitting, gripping my son's little hand, full of IV lines, praying as I leaned against the edge of the bed. Suddenly, his fingers moved slightly. I jumped and lifted my head. His long eyelashes fluttered, and slowly he opened his clear eyes. He looked at me a bit dazed from the medication, but his chapped lips weakly articulated one word, "Mommy, Mommy, my head hurts, hug me." My heart felt like it would burst. I hugged him, crying uncontrollably until my tears soaked his cheeks. My crying was no longer out of frustration or despair, but that of a mother who had snatched her son's life back from death. Dr. Miller and the medical team rushed in. They sighed in relief and informed me that Leo's brain had reacted extraordinarily well. He was completely out of danger and wouldn't have severe neurological damage if he went through rehab. In that moment, I knew my son and I had been reborn. 3 months after that storm, Leo's health had recovered to 80%. He could run and laugh again, though he sometimes limped slightly. The trial against Alexander and his accomplices was held under the watchful scrutiny of the public. Before the bench, a haggard, trembling Alexander received an 18-year prison sentence for his atrocious acts. Lauren and Marcus also received severe sentences for their greed and cruelty. The judge also granted a divorce decree in my favor. I got full custody of Leo, and Alexander's parental rights were permanently terminated. The Lincoln Park townhouse, a marital asset of which I was a co-owner and for which I could prove my financial contributions, was awarded to me to ensure my son's well-being. That day, standing on the steps of the Cook County Courthouse under a cloudless blue sky, I held Leo's hand and walked down, leaving behind all the bitterness, humiliation, and pain of a disastrous marriage. I remembered what my mother used to tell me. For a woman, marriage is like a lottery. No matter how smart or pretty you are, what counts is luck. I used to believe that phrase. I used to curse my fate for having run into someone so cruel. But now I realize that luck doesn't come on its own. When you are pushed to the brink of betrayal and evil, a mother's lucidity, courage, and protective instinct are the sharpest weapons to flip the board. In this life, karma never forgets anyone. Those who use cruelty and deceit to trample on the people who have stood by them from the start, and who plot to take the life of their own blood, will sooner or later burn in the flames of their own ambition. My son and I walked through the darkest night to now be able to receive the sunlight in freedom. I put the townhouse on the market and bought a cozy condo in the Lincoln Square area where no sad memories lingered. I opened a small business. Every day, I take Leo to school and cook our meals. Life can deal us lethal blows, but as long as we don't give up, after the storm, the sun always comes out. Sitting in my new home, on an afternoon when the final rays of sun tint the balcony gold, I watch Leo drawing intently by the window. The sound of colored pencils mixes with the breeze moving the flowers, creating a strangely comforting silence. How long had it been since I felt this real peace? A peace that doesn't require me to hide, that doesn't force me to depend on anyone's mood, and with no nightmares of the sound of heart monitors in the night. Watching my son grow, I sometimes wonder if I hadn't kept a cool head that day, if I had chosen to blindly endure, believing in blood ties, where would we be now? Maybe we would have disappeared, turned into cold statistics in some accident report, allowing the wicked to live freely over our remains. This terrible tragedy was like a flood. It swept away everything I valued, but it also exposed the rotten foundations of the marriage I was so proud of. I was always a traditional woman who believed that yielding once would bring peace. I believed that by giving myself entirely to my husband and my son, by being obedient and prudent, my home would be safe forever. I was wrong. I was painfully wrong to forget that kindness, if placed in the wrong hands, becomes bait for the cruel. I realized that the glamorous townhouse was just a luxurious glass cage in which I voluntarily locked myself, nearly losing the life of the person I love most. This awakening came late and full of scars, but it saved my life, transforming me from a fragile blade of grass whipped by the wind into a sturdy oak, ready to protect her son from any storm. To all the women and mothers listening to me through my story full of blood and tears, I draw a vital lesson that I want to pass on. Marrying might be a lottery, but we cannot sit and wait for luck and the decency of others to save us. Never become a shadow inside your own home. Never let love for a man strip away your right to be clear-headed, to ask questions, and to protect your dignity and your assets. If the person walking beside you is willing to push you overboard to save himself, you must be the first one to know how to swim and take the helm. Sacrifice is noble, but sacrificing yourself for someone who doesn't deserve it is foolish. Love with a burning heart, but look at life with a cold mind. Whatever the situation, always keep a way out, keep evidence, numbers, and truths, because sometimes that is our ultimate weapon to demand justice. Looking back on the journey from that mother who collapsed outside the ER doors to the icy woman outside the courthouse, watching a traitor being taken away in handcuffs, I feel like I have lived two lives. Strength doesn't come from nowhere. It is forged in the abyss of pain and betrayal. When you see your own son being stepped on, when you see that the man you shared your bed with is a demon, you understand that there is no greater fear than losing a child. And it is that exact same fear that becomes an unstoppable force to fight back. Karma exists in this world. It might be late, but it doesn't forget anyone. He who sows the wind reaps the whirlwind. He who uses falsehood to be happy builds castles of sand that will crumble when the truth comes to light. Don't blame God for being unfair. Believe that every blow life deals you is an opportunity to shed your naivety and become stronger and unbreakable. My life has turned the page. There are no more fake glitters, but it is full of true laughter. Thanks to that dedicated doctor, thanks to my loyal friend who stayed by my side in the dark, and above all, thanks to myself for not giving up. If my story helps wake someone up or gives a little strength to a woman in adversity, please don't hesitate to leave a like and share your thoughts. Your encouragement is our greatest comfort. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to keep listening to human lessons about real lives. Your support is our engine. Night has fallen. The light in the small apartment is warm and soft. Leo has finished his drawing. It's the two of us holding hands in a field of flowers. His smile is as radiant as the morning sun. I hug my son, breathe in the scent of peace, and feel my heart has finally healed completely. Thank you all for listening to the end. I wish you all, after the storms of life, find a safe harbor, full of peace and happiness. Good night.